I didn't volunteer, by the way. I kind of fell into law, really. Everything seemed to sort of flow from there. From a legal perspective, very often lawyers being referred to as dotting I's and crossing T's probably tells its story. Dotting I's and crossing T's didn't necessarily fit that particular bill. There are a number of accountants that will advertise themselves as business advisors or advisory and having the ability to provide strategic support. My experience is that they don't.
What's your experience of the billable hour?
As a customer or
as both? As both.
Those three items usually are the main three items as to why we would end up talking to a client or a customer. One of the ways in which we do that is by undertaking a valuation of the business right at the very outset.
So I've put here, Steve was a lawyer, not quite sure. Something like that.
You could
explain that to
That's how most people think of me.
Cool. This is good, actually, isn't it? With this,
yeah,
pretty hot.
What does it look like on the cameras?
Yeah, great. It looks
Does it?
really good.
Does it?
Yeah, cool.
This is good. This is why we're here.
Arms crossed or natural or whatever.
However you want.
Okay, ready to get going?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. All right.
It's rolling.
Welcome to Uncommon Sense. I'm John Cannock. I'm from the Uncommon Practice. As the name suggests, the idea that this will be a podcast where we hear uncommon sense from business leaders and business owners. The idea is that we want to provide our listeners with some stories, some insights, some advice that you definitely wouldn't find in a business textbook. That's the idea. So, aptly, our guest this week, talking uncommon sense, is on our first ever episode is Steve Harvey, who's the owner and director at our own business, the Uncommon Practice. Hi, Steve.
Hi, John.
Steve is a lawyer, not sure by trade. He'll come on to that. And a few years ago, you decided to set up the Uncommon Practice. So today, what I really want to do is talk about your reasons behind setting up the Uncommon Practice, why you chose to do it, why you thought that professional services was ripe for disruption, and then we'll talk a bit more about your work with SMEs. So thanks for coming along. Thanks for volunteering on our first ever episode.
I didn't volunteer, by the way.
So, as I mentioned, your background was originally in law.
Yeah.
Would be great to understand a bit more about your career and how you ended up at the Uncommon Practice.
Okay, so I kind of fell into law, really. I did an A-level in law, which kind of pushed me down the path of a university degree, and everything seemed to sort of flow from there. Quickly found myself leaning towards doing work for businesses rather than for individuals, and focused in the end on commercial contracts and corporate work, including buying and selling businesses. But generally speaking, found the industry to be quite tough. I thought the way in which businesses, legal businesses in particular, were set up were not conducive to providing really good service to their clients. Things like describing their staff as fee earners, striking fear of fees into each and every one of their customers, I didn't feel was particularly sensible. And the way in which they charged based upon hourly rates didn't necessarily mean that they needed to be efficient. So I found it difficult, albeit tried to change that as a managing partner of Hilly McEwen. And I did that job for quite some time before eventually deciding that the legal profession wasn't for me. So I'm now out of the legal profession and have turned my arm to doing more in the way of consulting work.
Right. So that was a few years ago then. You decided that you were going to set up your own practice, so the Uncommon Practice. Talk to me about the reasons why you said you were, you'd seen the light, if you like, in law, and you were keen to set up your own business. But talk to me a bit more about why you thought, what your reason was behind the Uncommon Practice, and what you were hoping to achieve, and why you thought professional services was a market that needed a firm like the Uncommon Practice.
Yeah, it's quite a big question, and the answer is multifaceted. But from a legal perspective, very often lawyers being referred to as dotting I's and crossing T's probably tells its story, which is that lawyers in particular, when it comes to being strategic for and on behalf of their clients, are considered to be very much downstream. And that used to frustrate me as an individual. I much preferred to have been involved with businesses in the curation of their commerciality in terms of what they wanted to do, and dotting I's and crossing T's didn't necessarily fit that particular bill. So trying to swim upstream is an interesting concept. And what I found as a lawyer was that we were very often beaten to the position of being the trusted advisor by all manner of other professionals, namely accountants and management consultants. So the idea of the uncommon practice was to try and build on professional services, bring professional services together, deliver a better, more holistic service. But for somebody like me as a lawyer, allow me that opportunity to swim upstream and get involved with our clients right at the very outset of commercial plans.
So what you used an interesting phrase there, which is trusted advisor. Now that's something which you'll read everywhere. Every single professional services firm in the world claims to be a trusted advisor. So I'm just interested, what does it mean to you to be a trusted advisor?
Well, for starters, I think trusted advisor is an overused expression, and I would probably say that those two words alone are insufficient, and actually should be interjected with trusted strategic advisor, because I think we can all be a trusted advisor, but actually support and help in and around strategy is where I think most clients get real value and benefit. So certainly the position that we would want to try and hold as much as we can do with our clients would be to get into that trusted strategic advisor position.
Mm-hmm. When you say, you used an interesting phrase, was swim upstream. Mm-hmm. So could you explain a bit more about what you mean by that? I assume you mean being engaged at an earlier point in the cycle, but I'm just interested to know exactly what you mean.
Sure. Well, in the context of the consultancy that we actually deliver now, most of our clients will have projects, whether those projects are to build upon certain commercial plans, and the execution of those projects is critical. Mm-hmm. And in the context of swimming upstream, what I'm probably referring to is being involved right at the very outset of understanding exactly what those commercial plans are, and having the ability to influence the way in which that plan is set out in terms of its strategy, and ultimately to support and assist in its implementation.
And so when you were in law, you felt that perhaps that wasn't happening. Is there a reason for that, do you think? Is it because in law, I'm guessing that in law it's because clients, bring the lawyers in to help with the actual transaction, and what you're saying is you'd rather be involved before that when the sort of strategy is being set up. Is that right?
Yes, it's not so much a question of what I would rather be. It's how I feel clients would get best benefit from the expertise that I hold, and a lot of other lawyers for that matter would hold. But they're very much denied that opportunity because lawyers are seen initially as being expensive, and therefore only called in once deals perhaps have been agreed, heads of terms have been agreed, whereas in actual fact there's a huge array of work that can be done by the lawyer way in advance of that, and actually would make that final piece an awful lot easier. Interesting.
So a couple of years ago then you decided that you were going to set up your own company, the Uncommon Practice.
Yeah.
The clue's in the name, I guess. So you've spoken about your reasons why you wanted to do it. So if I was going to ask you, okay, so you call yourselves Uncommon, what could you tell me a bit more about what you mean by uncommon, and how you behave in an uncommon way, or how you serve your clients in an uncommon way?
Sure. So the starting point for me is that the description that I've just given you of lawyers and the legal profession is not just limited to the legal profession. I think it spans other professional services, notably accountants. There are a number of accountants that will advertise themselves as business advisors or advisory, and having the ability to provide strategic support. My experience is that they don't and can't, and that actually there's an opportunity for accountants and lawyers to work much closely together to actually be much more strategic in the way in which they deliver support to SMEs. At the moment, that doesn't happen. There are very few businesses out there that can provide both legal support and accountancy or consultancy stroke advisory support. And so the uncommon element to the name is very much about that. We're changing what is commonly found in the market as being separate and distinct professions, accountancy and law, and bringing them together to deliver a holistic solution for customers, for clients. Yeah.
Great. I mean, I'm interested as well to talk to you a bit about, you mentioned something which I'm sure will be contentious to a few people, which is the idea of, which is the idea of the billable hour. Now, this is something which obviously is quite sacred in a lot of professional service firms, particularly in law firms. I was interested to hear you say that that's not something that you have at the Uncommon Practice or will ever have or use. What's your experience of the billable hour and am I right in thinking
as a customer or
as both? As both.
Right. So as a customer, I find it extremely painful. And it doesn't actually encourage you to want to speak to your lawyer very often. If indeed the number of times that you speak to your lawyer is actually going to be referable back to the bill that you get at the end of the day. I also find it interesting because it takes me down the path of thinking about the way in which professional services are priced. Mm-hmm. The hourly rate is clearly a cost plus model, as opposed to focusing in or concentrating on the value that a customer or a client would get from the advice that they've received. So it's very much our intention at the Uncommon Practice to ensure that all of our pricing is very much delivered in on the basis of the value that we transfer to our clients.
And when we think about the Uncommon Practice, one of the things that jumps out to me, I joined the business a few months ago, was this brand, all of this stuff that we've got behind us and the graffiti on the walls and the bold colours and the website and everything is quite in your face and it's quite different. So it's obviously got that reaction. But you were heavily involved with defining the brand right from the start. So I'm just interested to understand how that happened and what what your thoughts were behind the brand and all of that side of things.
Yeah, so professional services is pretty consistent in the way in which it delivers itself to the market. Lots of very blue conservative brands, and we certainly didn't want to just take part in that particular swamp. One of the benefits that we had was working with back at that particular day was working with a branding consultancy called No Camo. I should give them a name check because they were instrumental in helping us to develop the brand. And that for everybody that is listening is not just about obviously just the logo. It's about how we act, how we interact with our clients, the types of services that we offer. And indeed the clients that we want to work with. There are a number of telling questions that even though in professional services some might consider me to be a bit avant-garde, I think the reality was that I needed to be even more avant-garde to actually answer some of those questions that came back from the branding consultants or the branding agency. But I was lucky enough to work with them, lucky enough to build out the Uncommon brand. I think it stands for an awful lot of good that needs to change in the SME professional advisory space, and I'd like to think that as a bit of a standard bearer, there'll be others that follow. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely it's bold and it's brave. It is very different. You can't help but notice it. I suppose one of the things for me that's interesting, and I should say that obviously I look after the marketing and brand at the Uncommon Practice, so this is something I think about all the time. But it's interesting to me that you said it yourself. A brand is much more than just the logo. It's much more than just having a flashy website. To me, you've got to back up what you say. If you're saying that you're uncommon, you have to prove it. You can't just have a website. To me, a brand is the stories that people tell about your business. It's what people say to each other. It's how people are referred to you. You know, you said it yourself. It's much more than just a name or a logo. So if I was to say, you know, you're uncommon, how do you, to stop it just being a gimmick is where I'm going, I suppose. How would you back that up in terms of being uncommon? Is it about, well, I'm interested to get your viewpoint on that.
That for me, that's really simple, value transfer. It really is all about the value that our clients get. If they get the right kind of value from the services that we offer, then the stories that you talk about are invariably going to be very positive. They're going to build the brand as a result. So ultimately what we have to do is deliver what we say we are going to, and deliver it in a way that improves the value of each of our businesses.
And I suppose linked to that then is that the brand itself sort of self-selects clients. Would that be fair?
Yes, it would. Yeah.
So you're, you know, there are, let's be honest, there will be some businesses out there who will look at the brand and think, oh no, that's not for me. But I suppose that doesn't bother you.
No, not at all. No, I think part and parcel of the problem with professional services is that too often they want to be all things to all people,
right?
And that really marginalises the ability to build a brand in the space, because actually you start to then think about, well, we can't necessarily be over here because we need to be over here, and that compromises a position within the market. We've decided that we want to adopt a particular position in that market, and we'll unashamedly go after it.
Okay, so your position in the market would be, I know the answer to this, but I've got to ask you the question. So your position in the market would be SME businesses, is that right?
Yeah, very much so, yeah. I think corporates have the deep pockets to be able to get really good quality advice. I don't necessarily think that is the case in SME world, and I think the mid-tier accountants, mid-tier lawyers let certainly that particular market down. The uncommon practice is very much aimed at the SME market and delivering good quality advice into that market that is holistic and actually supports the individual entrepreneurs, because they are invariably busy, time poor individuals that don't have the ability to source professional services in the manner in which a corporate would. The market, as I said before, is also set up to such an extent that it expects the business owner to walk down the high street and select a lawyer and select an accountant and keep their fingers crossed and hope that the advice will be holistic and dovetail. My experience is that it isn't necessarily always the case.
So we've spoken a bit about the uncommon practice and your, the reasoning for setting up the business.
Yeah.
So now the uncommon practice you've got the accounting division, you've got the advisory consulting division. That's an interesting one. So to you, is there a difference between advisory or consulting? Do you see it as the same thing?
They are the same thing. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I was trying to think of a more, what's the word I'm looking for? Academic answer to that, but the reality is they're the same thing, and I think the words are used interchangeably within the profession.
So at the uncommon practice, you've got your accountancy division, you've got your advisory division, and plans to bring on the legal side of things.
Yeah.
So you've gone into business with obviously Heather and Marlon from the uncommon practice, and then you've got your advisory side, which is you head that up.
Yep. So
I'm just, if you could give our listeners a bit of an overview of what it is exactly that the uncommon consultants do for businesses. You've spoken a lot. I know that your reason for being, you say, is to increase the value of our client's business from day one. How do you do that?
Okay, so I think that usually tends to start with why businesses might want an advisor or a consultant to support them. It usually stems from a feeling of needing something extra within the business that they perhaps don't have at the moment. But once we're involved, once we start talking to our clients, one of the big questions that needs to flow from that conversation is, well, why? What is it that you think you might be missing, and where is it that you're trying to get to, or where is it that you're trying to go? Because trying to find that direction within every business is critical. I'm often heard to say to most of the clients that you very rarely get into your car without knowing where you're driving to, and I feel the same way about your business. If you don't truly know where your business is going, it's really difficult to drive it. So there's a real requirement for that. And in terms of direction, that generally tends to enable us to turn that conversation around to where the entrepreneur or the business owner is in the life cycle of that business. So is it growth for growth's sake? Is it growth to sell the business? Is it really that the business has hit a kind of crossroads and needs to find a new way forward? But those three items usually are the main three items as to why we would end up talking to a client or a customer. And in terms of trying to drive an understanding of how we can support them and certainly how we can drive value, one of the ways in which we do that is by undertaking a valuation of the business right at the very outset. That's not because every single one of the clients that comes to us wants to sell their business in the future. It's just that it makes it easier for us to demonstrate over a 1-2 year period the value that we've been able to bring to that particular business or to that particular customer.
So just so I understand that right, when a client comes in, you'll value the business at that point?
Yep.
How are you doing that?
Valuations of businesses are a dark art, and if the truth be told, there are very many formulas that you can use to value businesses. We will generally tend at that particular point to use a really kind of rough and ready calculation, but it just gives a little bit of a key as to where the business is at the minute, we will probably become more sophisticated as we move forward in terms of how we value that business, but at least it gives us a key at the outset and an ability to then start to talk to the client about the sort of things that they might want to be thinking about to improve the value of that business based against that particular formula.
Mm-hmm. No, it's neat because I think from my experience, SME business owners, if they're spending money, let's be upfront about it, on consulting or advisory, being able to demonstrate that value is absolutely key. And if you're not able to do that, why are they spending the money? So I guess that's why the valuation happens, so you can benchmark your progress over time.
Sure. And again, I think this probably stems from looking at this from the customer's perspective more so than from our own, is that any money spent is an investment in some way, shape or form, and an investment in the Uncommon consultants needs to deliver a return. And we're very focused on making sure that we're able to achieve that.
So just returning to something we spoke about before, obviously getting away from this idea of billing by the hour. It's interesting to me that you've spoken in the past about value-based pricing instead. So actually, basing the price, a price or the fee that your clients pay on the value that you've delivered. So at the end of a project or when you're working with a client, is there an element of, do you have an element of pricing based on the value that you brought to them?
Yes, we will do, depending upon what the client is wanting to achieve. So I think understanding the direction that they want to go down first is critical, and then that allows us to understand how we might be able to talk to them about a value-based price. We do generally tend to work with our clients in the main on a monthly retainer. But there is we would always want there to be some incentive in there for us to to deliver better than expected, and if we do that, then I'd like to think the clients would be happy that we've delivered what we said we were going to do and some, and then be prepared to share some of that with us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So again, coming back to some of the things that I've read that you've written about before and you speak about a lot, I know that mission, vision, values and behaviours is something that you talk about a lot in your work with clients and with SMEs. It's interesting to me because I suspect that a few of our listeners will be sat there thinking mission, vision, value, behaviours. I was going to swear then, but I'm not sure if I can. So they'll probably be sat there thinking, what a load of nonsense. What a load of fluff. What a load of crap. Come on, is that really going to grow my business? But I know it's something that you're really passionate about. So could you talk to me a bit more about that?
I think the answer is on its own, it won't grow your business. But collectively, with a lot of other stuff that we will put together, it's foundational stuff, and helps a business to develop out its brand, helps a business to understand what it is, where it is, what it's trying to be. The vision should be mission, values and behaviours should be shared with all staff, all stakeholders, and it should drive conversations around performance, conversations around recruitment, conversations around retention should all be structured in and around vision, mission, values, and behaviours. And as a result of which, I consider it to be absolutely fundamental to all businesses. Very difficult to understand a brand if they haven't actually spent some time thinking about, what it is they're aiming to be, what their vision is for their business in the future, and then in terms of their mission, what they're actually, what problems and what issues they're attempting to solve for the benefit of their customers. So those two principles alone are key and critical. The values that a business hold are absolutely essential. I think in the modern day, people generally tend to become a little bit more aware of what businesses stand for, and will make buying decisions based upon what they stand for, much more so than perhaps they have done in the past.
Mm-hmm. So how does that conversation go when you first approach a SME business owner? Do you find that that's something that they're willing to embrace or adopt, or is it a case of, I'm not going to give you a choice if you want to come and work with the Uncommon Practice, this is something that we need to get on top of straight away?
So it's interesting. I think the sessions that we have with our clients around vision, mission, values, and behaviours, easy for some to say, not so easy for me, certainly not today, is that once we're over the hurdle of we're going to do this session, they are better done with more people in the room, and certainly we tend to encourage the business owner to ensure that the whole of the management team are involved, because that's the first step of sort of ownership of the vision, mission, values, and behaviours, and facilitates that cascading down to the balance of the business. My experience is that I find them really interesting and entertaining and enlightening sessions. I genuinely tend to think that clients get a lot out of them, and it helps them to think more deeply about their business and what their business is, or certainly what they want their business to be. Yeah.
And do you ever find when you're speaking to these businesses that they disagree on what their mission, vision, values, behaviours are, or do you find that often it's just something intrinsic that they've got in the business that they sort of understand, they've just never defined it or written it down?
It's a really interesting question, but if there's vehement disagreement within a management team about what the vision, mission, values, and behaviours
you've got a problem.
You've got a problem.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, that's exactly the purpose behind having the sessions, is to identify where there is commonality, because invariably where they can find commonality will be exactly where the actual brand of the business sits.
Mm-hmm. So here's an interesting question, and I'm going to ask you anyway, which is around behaviours and values. So we've spoken a lot, and I know that this will be something that will interest a lot of people, is if you have someone in your workforce who doesn't meet your values, you could call them toxic, in a sense that toxic in that their behaviours are spreading around the firm, negative. We talk a lot here about mood hoovers and fun sponges, and I absolutely love that. I use that for my under-8s football team as well, because they get it, because you get it. If you've got a person in the team that's going to bring everyone down, do you want them? I'm intrigued to know, as a business owner and as someone who's run businesses, what's your view on, I think I know, but I'm interested to know what's your view on mood hoovers, toxic performers. What would you suggest that business owners do if they recognise they've got someone in their business like that?
So get rid of them quickly,
right.
I guess is probably the answer. I mean, I say that a little flippantly. I think there is always opportunity to talk to people about how they behave, and the vision, mission, values, and behaviours allows for that. It actually provides a forum for it, and you would like to think that when approached, some can change their behaviours. I have seen people change, but if you do have consistent people falling consistently below
right.
the behaviour bar that you set, then I think you have to do something about it. And I don't think it's just about that particular individual at that particular point either. It's more about the business and the way in which that negativity radiates throughout the business. And I think then once you start to understand that, you realise how detrimental it can be to the business. And this is where it becomes really interesting, could result not in that particular person leaving, but somebody else, because they're not happy with those behaviours. So, and that other person that leaves might be somebody that is actually the one that you want to retain, the one that you want to keep, the one that you want to point to as the one that exhibits the right values and behaviours. So I think once the vision, mission, values and behaviours are set, it also encourages the management to uphold them and to uphold them for the benefit of all the stakeholders.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. So what you're saying really is that your values, in a sense, are basically the behaviours that you're willing to tolerate and that you're not willing to tolerate. Would that be fair?
It would be fair, but I do think you're painting a negative picture of behaviours, because I think the attitude that we should be having towards behaviour is really pointing towards the positive stuff.
Right. Okay.
So yes, they do give you an ability to deal with poor performers, but on the flip side of that, I also think it gives you the ability to deal with high performers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a very easy way of being able to show people how somebody who goes above and beyond the values and the behaviours set is someone that's ultimately going to rise up through that business and be increasingly important to it.
Great. Yeah. So, coming back to your work with the Uncommon Consultants, when you've worked with the clients and you have some clients who are looking to sell. So you've got some clients who are looking to sell, and I suppose you've spoken in the past about when it comes to selling your business that there's this it's a game of snakes and ladders. Which I like. I'm just wondering if you could explain a bit more about that, what you mean by the game of snakes and ladders.
Yeah, so there are facets of how you build your business that will help you to increase its value. And there are elements of a business that can be disregarded or not given sufficient attention, which could ultimately provide for snakes. So that's the reference back to, if you like, snakes and ladders. But I find the gaming analogy really quite interesting because, in my experience, the vast majority of businesses are bought by players that have played the game more than once and so have greater experience of it. Certainly in the SME world, vendors, may well be relatively new to the game of snakes and ladders. And I find it really interesting because people who develop a business will work hard at it and very often work hard at it for tens of years. And I find it really interesting that they'll then go at the game of snakes and ladders sometimes without having applied the same amount of discipline, time and attention to how they've grown their business to how they then want to sell their business. So there is a critical and fundamental piece of me that believes that selling your business is something that you don't take lightly, that preparing for the sale of your business is critical, and that needs to start 2 and 3 years out from the time at which it's undertaken. So preparing businesses for sale is something that we do and consult on. It's part of our sweet spot, as it were, but very much with a focus on winning the game of snakes and ladders.
So in the 2-3 years before the sale is the ideal time that you'd want to be speaking to a client rather than right at the end. What would you be doing with them? What are you doing with them over those 2 or 3 years?
I'd say before that, John.
Okay.
Because I think if you're setting out, if you come back to where we started this conversation around how do we start with our clients from a consulting perspective and the relevance of fundamental stuff like mission, vision, values and behaviours, getting that sort of stuff set and ingrained within the business has to start way before people will even start thinking about maybe even selling their business. So we would like to think that our typical engagement with clients could span as much as 4 years. And even at the end of that 4 years, the business might not necessarily be in a position to execute a sale, but might be in a much better position to start thinking about selling.
So can you give me some examples of snakes maybe and the ladders? Could you give me some
from experience,
real world examples?
Snakes in particular, it stems from not paying enough attention to the detail. I can think of a restaurant chain that I was involved in where they hadn't necessarily considered their lease to the extent that they should have done, and I can think of an IP-based business that hadn't necessarily protected its IP in the manner in which it should have done. So those are very obvious things, and the point about that is that every business that does go through a sale generally goes through a due diligence process, and you would expect the due diligence process to pick out things like that. Critically, the due diligence process is something that people do need to understand, and understand the way in which the game is played, because it's all part and parcel of the snakes and ladders. And experienced buyers will instruct their professional suppliers, accountants, and lawyers to look for opportunity to find weaknesses in the target business and to use those as leverage to negotiate down the purchase price. So making sure that we've got some real detail in and around the way in which the data is put together in a data room, winning that game of due diligence is kind of critical. But a lot of the value of a business is based upon its multiple. So, and the things that sort of impact upon a multiple are fundamental stuff that we will work with our clients in the context of our consultancy. So, things like its brand, its leadership team, access to particular markets, its culture. They're all very valuable things that are difficult to necessarily put a price on,
right,
but they certainly influence the multiple, and that's a critical piece of the work that we do, is working both on the financial performance of the business but also the non-financial performance of the business, and particularly those non-financial items that would affect a multiple.
Interesting. I know that when we talk about the multiple, you've written previously about this idea of single points of failure within a business and how important that is in affecting the multiple. Could you just explain a bit more what you mean by single point of failure in a business?
Well, there are many single points of failure in businesses, but the one that we come across the most is actually the business owner themselves, and actually being the person where too much goes directly to them. Encouraging them through the consultancy process to bring on a management team is again a huge part of what we do. And there are lots of issues that flow from that around trust and confidence and that feeling of being responsible as the business owner. But if the truth be told, coming towards the end of that business cycle and looking at the possibility of a sale, that business is much more saleable with a good leadership team than it is just with the entrepreneur still being the single point of failure.
So when you talk about the snakes and ladders, when you say ladder, you're thinking of those areas of the multiple, are you, that people need to be working on?
Yep.
Is that what you mean by that?
That's exactly what I mean, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've spoken about previously as well, the uncommon practice is unashamedly, I think is the phrase we use, unashamedly on the side of SMEs. For quite a lot of SME business owners at the moment will be thinking this is quite a tough time. I think the phrase we've used is, economic headwinds, which is probably been a bit, underplaying it a bit. I think there's businesses out there that are struggling, with inflation and other things like that. You've got an interesting view on that, I think, though, in terms of what businesses should be doing when times are tough. I don't know if you could share that with us.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is I think that these hiatuses are real opportunities for businesses when they are quieter to build and to focus in on the way in which they deliver their product or their service, focus on the policy process and procedures that they have within their business. And by building their business, will actually put themselves in a position to take advantage of the upside when it comes, because the economy works in cycles at the end of the day, and for every downside there's an up.
So you're saying really keep building now, even when times are tough?
I think it's actually more important to build. It gives you that ability to really accelerate out of a recession, perhaps in a manner in which your competition can't.
Great. I suppose before we wrap things up, I'd like to ask you a bit more about your, coming back to your career, and you're a business owner, you've been a managing partner of a law firm. The whole purpose of this podcast really is to try and sort of understand, get some uncommon sense from the people that we've got on here.
You're trying to say that nothing
what I'm saying is so far you've spoken a lot of great common sense. I think what I'm interested to get from you, if possible, Steve, is in your experience as a business owner and as a leader, have you got anything that you would share with listeners that you found has been critical to your career, or something that you would any advice that you would give to business owners out there in particular?
God, that's a really interesting question. So you're asking me what salient learnings have I had through the course of my time. Listen, I think is probably the biggest one, is listen. Always have your own views, but listen and allow other people's people to influence your views. I think if you're too stiff, too focused on what it is that you've got in mind, it can often get in the way of making good decisions, and other people have certainly got contributions to make.
And I know that when we look at the Uncommon Practice and we think about the brand, you think, it's fun. There's a lot about it which is bright and a bit different. Is that your outlook on business, would you say?
Absolutely, yeah. If business becomes unfun, not funny, it's tough. It's hard to get up and motivate yourselves in the morning. So it has to be fun, and what comes with that is a lighter area, kind of attitude towards it, but still coming back to some key core fundamentals. But the businesses that I think do really, really well are those businesses that really focus in on that cultural element and making sure that people enjoy coming into work. They work hard when they're there, and reap the benefits for doing so on a group-wide basis.
This has been really interesting. Thanks so much for joining us on Uncommon Sense, Steve. Thanks.
All right. Cheers, John.